Let's be honest, when you think of great Indian empires, your mind probably jumps straight to the Mughals, right? But what if I told you that for 300 years before them, Delhi was the heart of another massive, game-changing empire? That's right, we're talking about the Delhi Sultanate. And today, we're going to unpack its incredible story. And it all comes crashing down in this one single year, 1526. After 3 whole centuries of power, this is the year the Delhi Sultanate meets its incredibly dramatic end. So that begs the question, right? How on earth does an empire that lasts for 300 years just vanish in a single battle? It's a huge question, and to get to the bottom of it, we've got to rewind. We have to go all the way back to its very, very unlikely beginnings. Okay, so let's get right into this, because the origin story of the Delhi Sultanate, it's honestly one of the most remarkable in all of history. Seriously, this wasn't an empire founded by some long line of princes or wealthy nobles. No, this was an empire built by men who were, at one point, literally considered property. You see, the Sultanate wasn't just one single family ruling for 300 years. It was actually a series of 5 completely different dynasties, one after the other. Each one left its own unique stamp on history. And it all kicked off with the Mamluks, who are also known, pretty fascinatingly, as the slave dynasty. So what in the world is a Mamluk? This is really key. We're not talking about slavery in the way you might typically picture it. These were elite Turkic slave soldiers. They were often bought as kids and then put through this incredibly rigorous training in warfare, in strategy, and administration, basically everything you'd need to run an empire. And the best of them rose through the ranks to hold the highest positions of power. They became a powerful military class all on their own. And this guy right here is the one who started it all, Qutb-ud-Din Aybak. He was a Mamluk, a super loyal and talented general for his master, Muhammad Ghori. But then, when Ghori died, Aybak did something really bold. He didn't just hold the territory for his dead master's family. Nope. He declared it independent, established his own sovereign kingdom, and made Delhi his capital. And just like that, around 1206, the Delhi Sultanate was born. So Aybak laid the foundation, but these next few rulers are the ones who really built the house. You have his successor, Iltutmish, who was the great consolidator. He really tightened things up and even standardized the currency. And then you get his daughter, the absolutely remarkable Razia Sultan. Think about this. She was the first and only female Muslim ruler of the entire Sultanate. And after her, you get Balban, who came in and centralized power with an iron fist, making the Sultan's authority pretty much absolute. So, okay, they've built this empire, but how did they actually run it? I mean, we're talking about a vast, diverse, and often rebellious territory. Let's pop the hood and take a look at the Sultanate's operating system, so to speak. The whole structure was a pretty clear-cut hierarchy. At the very top, you've got the Sultan. He's the CEO, the Supreme Court, and the Commander-in-Chief, all rolled into one. Directly under him is the Wazir, who's kind of like the Prime Minister or Chief Operating Officer, running the day-to-day. Then you've got the Diwans, who are like department heads for crucial things like finance and the military. And finally, and this is super important, you have the Iqtidars. These were the real boots on the ground. Now, this whole machine was powered by a really clever idea called the Iqta system. Think about the central problem. How do you pay all your generals and top officials across a massive empire, especially when hard cash is scarce? Well, instead of a salary, the Sultan would grant an official the right to collect taxes and revenue from a piece of land. That's an Iqta. And in return for that income, the official, the Iqtidar, had to maintain a certain number of soldiers ready to fight for the Sultan at a moment's notice. It was a brilliant way to fund both the administration and the army. And where did all this revenue come from? Well, it mostly boiled down to 3 main sources. First, you had the Kharaj, which was a tax on agricultural land. This was the absolute bedrock of the economy. Then there was the jizya, a tax specifically levied on non-Muslim subjects. And finally, you had customs duties and taxes on all the goods flowing through the markets and trade routes. Okay, so now that we know how the system was supposed to work, let's see it in action. We're going to zoom in on 2 of the Sultanate's most powerful, and I mean most powerful, and totally different rulers. Their reigns show the empire at its absolute peak, but you can also start to see the cracks forming. And here you have a real tale of 2 sultans. On one side, you've got Alauddin Khilji. This guy was a ruthless, pragmatic military genius. Everything he did, like his famous market reforms where he controlled prices with an iron fist, was all about one thing: supporting his massive army and consolidating state power. Pure efficiency. Then, on the other side, you've got Muhammad bin Tughlaq. He was a brilliant intellectual, a visionary, just full of these grand, ambitious ideas. He tried to move the entire capital city hundreds of miles south. He even introduced a new token currency, kind of like paper money. But here's the thing. While his ideas were often brilliant on paper, the execution was, well, a total disaster. And his grand experiments ended up costing the empire dearly. So after the incredible heights reached under rulers like the Khiljis and the Tughlaqs, the empire's foundations really started to shake. The decline wasn't a sudden collapse, not at first. It was more like a long, slow unraveling, caused by all sorts of pressures from both inside and out. And you can see the major cracks appearing right here. You had constant rebellions from local chiefs who never really wanted to be ruled by Delhi. That really clever Ikta system we talked about, well, it started to become hereditary. So instead of loyal officials, you ended up with powerful regional lords who basically had their own mini-kingdoms. Tughlaq's field policies had thrown the economy into chaos. All the while, there was this relentless pressure from Mongol invasions in the northwest, which was a huge drain on resources. By the time the later dynasties, the Sayyids and Lodis, came to power, they were just trying to hold a crumbling empire together. And that brings us to the final act, the Lodi dynasty. They were the last family to rule the Sultanate, but the empire they inherited was really just a shadow of its former glory. It was fractured, it was rebellious, and it was incredibly vulnerable. And so here we are. We've come full circle, right back to where we started. We're at the final battle, the one that's going to bring this 300-year-long story to a dramatic close and, really, change the entire course of Indian history. The year is 1526. The place is Panipat. The Sultan, Ibrahim Lodi, leads his weakened and divided army against a brand new threat coming out of Central Asia. It's the forces of Babur, and they've got something new: cannons and superior tactics. The battle was decisive. The Sultanate was shattered. And in its place, Babur would lay the foundation for a whole new dynasty you've probably heard of, the Mughals. But wait, the Sultanate didn't just vanish into thin air. Its legacy, its ideas, they lived on. The Mughals, for all their power, didn't build their administrative state from scratch. Not at all. They basically took the Sultanate's blueprint, its centralized rule, its tax collection methods, its system of provincial government, and they adopted it, refined it, and scaled it up. And just look at the physical legacy they left behind. It's absolutely stunning. This period saw the birth of a brand new style, Indo-Islamic architecture. It's this beautiful, unique fusion of Indian craftsmanship and Islamic design. And these majestic structures, like the iconic Qutb Minar, they're still standing tall today, a powerful testament to the Sultanate's massive cultural impact. And you can't forget the economics, the systems they created, the methods for surveying land, for collecting revenue, for protecting trade routes. All of this laid the economic groundwork for what was to come. You could say they built the economic engine that would one day fuel the legendary, mind-boggling wealth of the Mughal Empire. Which brings us to our final big question. It's really easy to look at the Delhi Sultanate as just the prequel, the opening act for the main event, the grand drama of the Mughals. But when you really think about it, when you consider its totally unique slave-to-sultan origins, its complex administration, its lasting impact on the culture and politics of the subcontinent, you have to ask, was it just a prequel? Or was it a truly groundbreaking, powerful, and important empire in its own right? Now that's something we're thinking about.